So here we are at day 4. Supposed to cover Cook chapter 6 and 7. Chapter 6, socio-emotional development in infants and toddlers. Page 191 and 192 talks about research with monkeys. Why are we talking about research with monkeys when we're studying child growth and development? Any idea?
Because they think we came from monkeys, so why not test them?
So maybe we can learn something from studying monkeys about being better parents. I'm thinking there's a better place to go than out in the woods and studying monkeys. And that's some of it. Some of the driving force is, it's kind of sad. We think, since we're like all the rest of the animals in the world, then we ought to study all the animals and then follow their patterns. But it's interesting to me, the ones that they talk about following, like evolutionists will talk about the survival of the fittest, and they'll go to the lions and how the fittest survive. And I'm going, guys, do you know what these lions do? When a lion invades or takes over a harem, gotcha, Hannah. Except I think it's called the pride, which tells you something about what we've learned from lions. That when he takes over, do any of you ladies know this? You've got this big old male lion that's protecting his harem, his pride, and then a bigger, stronger lion comes by and drives him away. And so now that he's gone, the new male dominates. But what does he do? He kills all the babies. That's disgusting. And one time I said at a class when they were trying to make these parallels between us and animals, why do we pick and choose which things we want to talk about? I said, because some of this stuff is just disgusting. And they said, well, yeah, but you know, it illustrates a point. I'm like, well, the point is that we're better than animals, or at least we ought to be. And sometimes I think we look for excuses to be like animals, and then when you find out there are all these animals that have monogamous relationships, it's like, why don't we look at those for an example rather than the ones that are doing despicable things? But part of the driving force for doing research, I was just asking about page 191 and 192 about research with monkeys, because you can't take little children and do experiments with them like you can monkeys. I mean, they'll let you put some little monkeys in a lab and do experiments with them to check things out, some of your theories you have about attachment and stuff, and you can't do that with real little children. So that's why they come along and say, hey, let's study monkeys. But you don't have to do experiments with children. You can just watch little children, do a lot of observation, and collect information from it, and find out a lot of what's going on. Page 190 talked about the bond between infants and primary caregivers being called attachment. Do you recall being attached to a caregiver? Any of you have memories back to when you were 2 years old or younger and having a caregiver that you were very much attached to? Or have you had people tell you that you had a caregiver that you were very much attached to? Do you know whether or not you had healthy attachments when you were a 2-year-old? From birth to 2? Did you have a happy birth to 2 childhood? Who remembers? Anyone remember? So, if you didn't have, you don't know it. If you did have, you don't know it. You'll just have to go ask your parents. Did I have a healthy birth to 2-year-old life? And they go, why are you asking questions like that? Well, I'm studying human growth and development, and I just want to know what you people did to me between birth and 2 years of age. Find out. Page 193, Mary Ainsworth talks about stranger situations, responses. Do any of you remember from birth to 2 years encountering strangers? Do any of you know little kids under 2 who will just run up to anybody? Seems like nobody's a stranger. And others? Anyone other than mom and dad? Out of bounds. Don't get near me. Don't touch me. What do you think accounts for that difference?
Personality of the kids.
What?
Their kids' personalities.
I'm with you. I think it's mostly personality. But can you see where somebody can say, well, the kid who's a little apprehensive, he just didn't have a healthy, birth to 2 experience. I'm going, come on. I think most of that is personality. I mean, think of it in terms of as an adult personality. Look at the differences in us. I mean, some people, they're everybody's friend. You know anybody like that? And see, when I meet someone like that, it's like, who are you? Do I know you? It's like, hey, it doesn't matter. We're friends. I'm going, I don't think so. And they go, hey, what's your problem? I said, I don't have a problem. I just don't have many friends. And the ones I do have, I don't see you in that bucket. Well, la-di-da. I'm going, hey, it's just difference in personality. You like a bunch of friends? I like having 2 or 3, 4 or 5. That's enough for me. I mean, how many friends do you have to be a happy camper in life? And again, I think it's just a personality. A lot of it's personality. Children who don't become securely attached, or as Mary Ainsworth says on page 195, insecure attached children are avoidant, and they're resistant, and they can be disoriented. So it's like, okay, so we probably ought to work at helping children become attached. Anyone know what you could do if you have a 2-year-old in your life? What could you do to help that 2-year-old develop a sense of attachment with the adult world around them? Any of you have any 2-year-old nieces or nephews? Or so when they come to see you or you go to see them, they've been eating candy or peanut butter sandwiches, and they come running at you, and what do they want to do? Do they want to jump in your lap? Are they wanting to connect with you? And are you worried about getting peanut butter and jelly on your clothes? And you push them away, go, whoa, 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 let's wash your hands before I hold you on my lap and get all that sticky stuff all over my clothes. Now, do you understand that poor little kid can think that you're rejecting him and not the peanut butter and jelly that he has all over his hands? I'm thinking the wise thing for you to do is just go ahead and get sticky stuff on your clothes and then wash it off later. because he needs to have some people helping him become attached in life. It's going to help him in terms of his own sense of security and his sense of being secure with other people. So just do the kind of things that it takes. And in my mind, what that means is that you hold these little kids, you let these kids climb all over you. You give them, what do they call them? Can I have a piggyback ride? Do I look like a pig? Just get down on the floor and do some contact stuff with these little kids. I think page 199 talks about fathering, how important it is. I think one of the greatest problems today is fathers who won't humble themselves and allow their children to develop attachment stuff. I mean, I just think that when our children were under 2, some of the greatest things I did was just to come home from work and lay down on the floor and just let these little kids climb all over me. And sometimes they would just want to lay on my chest and put their head down and listen to me. And I'd just be laying there talking to their mother about what went on that day and maybe rubbing them a little bit or playing with them or just touching them. And they would just lay there and listen to my diaphragm vibrate and listen to my voice. And somehow it just seemed that gave them a sense of belonging and attachment. And it was awkward for me to do that because I don't recall my father doing that with me. And can you see how if we're not careful, we can take the way we were raised and just assume that we'll raise the next generation the same way, when it might be that we ought to make some changes in what we're doing with these little kids to give them a sense of attachment. Again, the other thing I think, if I haven't said it before, I talked about is just telling my little kids when they were young like this how much I love them. And just saying, I love you. I just love you so much. Oh, and then since we're talking about socio-emotional, and this is where we ought to be talking about spiritual too, and guess who else loves you besides mom and dad? God loves you. I mean, in my mind, the way you help a 2-year-old, a birth to 2-year-old, develop spiritually is just talking with them about spiritual things, or letting them kind of observe your life's routine, that you pray at mealtime, you read the Bible. I mean, our little girls would see us when they were this age. They would see us praying when we sat down to eat. They would see us reading the Bible together. They would see us singing songs. They would hear us singing songs together, hymns and stuff like that. It's just like you just let them see your faith in action, and they just kind of pick up on that's the way life is. In fact, one time, one of our little girls, we were at her grandmother's house, and and she just said, I couldn't believe it. I thought, uh-oh, because we prayed before we ate every meal, and she goes, Grandma, how come we don't return thanks before we eat at your house? And I thought, uh-oh. And her grandmother said, well, sweetie, I don't know why we don't do that. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? And she goes, yes. And so all of a sudden my mother-in-law says, Tom, would you like to return thanks for this food? I'm going, sure, Mom, thanks. And it was just kind of neat that it introduced us to the place to where when we got together for a family gathering, my mother-in-law would ask me if I wanted to pray before the meal. And I thought, why not let my children see that in action? Not trying to put anybody in a box, but it was just neat that she was inviting me to express my faith in front of her grandchildren, all because the little grandchild asked a question. family leave policies. Oh, you've got to look at this. This is something else. Can you see that? Oh, no, you can't. How can you see something when it's not on? Is it coming on? On page 201, it talks about family leave policies by country. What does it say on page 201 about America's family leave policy? Yeah, let's get in there. While let's get in there, let's see what it says on page 201 about that. Sweden, Norway, Portugal, Poland, Spain, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Mexico, Turkey, Great Britain, New Zealand, and United States. How much leave do they get? Sweden gets a year. Norway, 42 weeks. Portugal, 6 months. Is it coming on yet? More than 120 nations provide paid maternity leave. Including most industrialized nations, except, now, why does it say except Australia, New Zealand, and the United States? Doesn't it show here that New Zealand and the United States are here? Yeah, you get 52 weeks of parental leave in New Zealand and 12 weeks of parental leave in the United States, but look at the wage replacement column. It's unpaid. If there's any country that is wealthy enough to provide paid maternity leave and productive enough, I would think it would be us, wouldn't you? So why are we not doing that? Anyone know why we don't pay for that? I'll just minimize that. Oh, just click.
I wonder if, because of the way our government's set up, it falls on the businesses. Maybe these other countries, the government kind of pays for it, but we kind of don't get that.
For sure that would be true in Sweden, wouldn't it? Where the government pretty well is the driving force behind it. And here we leave it up to each business to make its own decision. And businesses say, you know, we're a business. We're not here to raise. Our mission in life is not to raise babies. It's our business. If you want to have a baby, go have one. But
there's still like government programs like food stamps and stuff. So I don't quite understand why it would be.
But it's like, if you want to have a baby, go have one. But don't expect us to pay you when you're not working. In America, you get paid for being productive. It's like, well, some countries think their employees are so valuable. They pay them when they take a leave for a year to have a baby. Well, I could see some American boss saying, well, then move to that country and get a job.
It seems like Americans usually have more babies than other countries too, so like the leave it might just keep going for some people. Like if it was like a 3-year leave or something, you know.
It's just somehow we have just not picked up on that notion like other countries have. That we just don't seem to value it as highly as others do. Possibly because the government doesn't push it more, or because we just think, no, you want to work, you want to have a family, and be done with it. Temperament on page 203. Nine temperament divisions on page 204. Activity level. So let's think in terms of some 2-year-olds and their various activity levels. Have any of you ever worked in children's church with 2-year-olds? Here's one 2-year-old that just sits over here and plays with a few toys and spends the whole time doing that. And another one just spends the whole time running around trying to take other people's toys. And doesn't seem to want to play with the toy, just wants to take it. And then when you try to say, no, don't do that, he runs away from the teacher, and you grab him and say, give the toy back and go over here and get one out of the box. And he, no, and you take it and make him give it back, and then take him to the box to pick one. He picks one, and then he just runs around and drops it somewhere. He just wants to bang, 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 bang off the walls. Highly active. Rhythmic, how predictable is he in terms of his sleep and feeding and elimination schedules? And approach to withdrawal, what do they do when people step away from them and leave them alone? A new situation, are they accepting or rejecting of it? Adaptability, how much ease do they have in terms of their being confronted with a new situation? How responsive are they? How intense are the reactions? One little kid said, no, you can't take that toy, you have to give it back. Okay. Another one, you can't take that toy. I want this toy. It's just different personalities. What kind of mood do they have? Joyful or friendly or pleasant or unpleasant? How easily distracted are they? One time I thought I was working with a little kid in children's church, but I thought, he's not catching one bit of this lesson I'm teaching. Because he was just everywhere. And all these other little kids were laying around on the floor, looking at the picture, following the story. And when I was finished, I started asking some follow-up questions to see if any of them had registered the lesson. And the little guy who was running around the room was shouting out all the answers. I'm going, what? This is so bizarre. The little kids who were just sitting there were just kind of, that's what we're supposed to do. And the little guy running around the room, he was running around, but he was listening and to everything that was being said and taking it in. And I thought, it just shows you can't make blanket judgments about what's going on in a classroom with little kids. And how much attention span do they have? This is interesting to me. When our daughters were older, and the teenagers at church would sit together, and and not do much but get in trouble with some of the deacons for passing notes and talking. I said, I think our girls just need to sit with us in church. And did any of you have parents who made you sit with them when all of your friends were sitting together on the back row or something, and they just go, Dad, that is so embarrassing. You treat us like little children. I said, okay, girls, tell you what, I don't want you sitting back there with them, so why don't you go downstairs and sign up to work with the kids in children's church and help the teachers down there. And so they did, and the teachers loved having the help, and then they asked me if they wanted to teach a lesson. And I thought, this is amazing. When a little kid, okay, here's a big adult, here's a little 2-year-old. A big adult starts to teach a lesson, and they seem to listen for a certain length of time. A young teenager or a preteen teaches the same lesson, and sometimes the little kids will listen twice as long. I thought, what's going on here? Why would they do that? Little kids are very susceptible to the influence of older children who are closer to their age. And once you realize that, then you say, you know, we really need to use the teenagers and the young people in our church to have an effective ministry with these little kids in our classrooms. Page 205 talks about 3 constellations of temperaments: easy, difficult, and slow to warm up. So which one were you? Were you easy, difficult, or slow to warm up? Do you know? Any of you have your parents tell you what you were? What?
I was difficult. I only liked my mom, my grandma, and my nursery worker at church.
And everybody else could stay away.
Mm-hmm.
Those 3 friends are all I need for the rest of my life. And the rest of you buzz off.
Yep.
And because, see, and I'm thinking, what's wrong with that? But what happens? Because of that personality type, what's the label? What's the label they stick on you? Difficult. Anybody else get a difficult tag stuck on them somewhere? See, I think that's wrong. I mean, okay, if you came to Sunday school or to the nursery and they put an easy sticker on you, or if they put slow to warm up sticker, but difficult, give me a break. How about easy, slow to warm up, and doesn't want to be bothered? I mean, can't we find a more positive way to label that third group? But for some reason, that's the label we give them. Were any of you labeled easy? You would go to anybody, do anything, whatever they said, eat anything they put on your plate? Were any of you slow to warm up? You don't know. Well, you need to ask your parents. What kind of child was I? An easy, difficult, or slow? And you know why difficult children often know they were difficult children? Because their parents tell them they were difficult children. The parents with easy children and slow to warm up children, it's like, oh, they're just a little slow to warm up. You know, da-da-da, don't worry about it. And then the easy one, yeah, he's just easy to work with. But the difficult one, yeah, he's a little difficult. So somehow we get told that we've got a label, and the label is difficult. And I'm thinking, we need to find another word for that. And so consequently, and maybe it's because I was labeled difficult too, I watch out for these little kids that people put the difficult patch on them and say, I'm going to do all I can to help this little guy realize that life is not as bad as people make it out to be. And we're not as bad as people say we are. We just only need 3 friends in life, and that's enough. And the rest of you buzz off. Go find some other little kids. Get a whole bunch of easy children or slow to warm up children to play with. What's an easy child like? See, okay, if we're going to call them difficult children, then I think we should have negative labels for the other 2. To be fair to all 3 groups. So I tried to come up with if an easy child is positive, smiles a lot, very flexible, I came up with a negative word for that. Oblivious to what is going on around them. There. So go ahead, put a difficult label on me and put an oblivious label on him. And what about the slow to warm up? I couldn't think of a negative thing to say about it. Can you think of a negative label for slow to warm up children? I suppose we could say because their initial reaction is, don't get near me, touchy, touchy, touchy. But I think it's better to stick with positive labels for all 3 kinds. Difficult. What's wrong with that? One family might label a highly active child as curious, inquisitive, lively, or spirited, while another family might label such a child as trouble. A highly active child, he just gets into everything. It's like, how about we say he's curious about all this stuff? Well, you know what curiosity did to the cat? Does everyone know? Have any of you ever seen a curious cat that died in the process of being curious? Where does this stuff come from? I don't get it. He's just curious. He's just inquisitive. What do you think is said to inquisitive children who ask a lot of questions? Or were some of you inquisitive children who ask a lot of questions? I can tell you what's said to them. Don't ask so many questions. And if I knew I wouldn't get in trouble for saying it, and if I had thought about it at the time, I would have said, don't put me in a world that has so many questions to be answered. Lively and spirited. I like that one. He's just a little live wire. He's just a little spirited. Page 206 talks about goodness of fit, the degree to which the child's temperament and their environment are compatible. So, if you're a difficult child, but your mother was a difficult child, I don't know if she was or not, but if she was a difficult child, and if your grandmother was a difficult child, then what do they care? Because the 3 of you are friends and 1 person at church, that's all we need. You understand? It's just like, hey, there's a goodness of fit here. But if your grandmother was an easy child, and your mother was an easy child, and you're a difficult child, yeah, you're probably going to feel like sometimes, I don't think anybody in this house loves me. And I think it's important for us as adults to say, what can we do to make the environment fit the temperament of the child. If we have a child here who's very active, then let's do some active stuff. Let's adjust the environment to allow the child to be himself. But you can look at a lot of situations and say, you know, this kid wouldn't have near as much grief if he was in another situation in life. But we have to be careful that we just don't kind of impose our own personal environment and say, look, this is the environment, the kid will have to fit into it. No, I might need to change my environment a bit. For the sake of, excuse me, of the temperament of my children. Page 209 talks about emotional contagion. One baby cries, and what happens? They all start crying. One baby gets upset. Now, I can see if one cries, the rest of them start crying. But if one of them gets upset, so why do the rest of them have to get so upset? I don't know. It's like it's contagious. One child is a little fearful, and they all become fearful. Yeah, but one child is having a good time and excited, and they all start to get excited and have a good time. Children look for, on page 210, children look for emotional cues from their caregivers. What kind of emotional cues should a caregiver send to a little child? Have you ever seen caregivers sending emotional cues to children in a store? Think of someone pushing a cart around in a store with a 2-year-old in it. Can you picture that? Have you seen one of those recently? What kind of emotional cues are the caregivers sending to the children? You ever see some parent that's off looking at merchandise, and this little 2-year-old is halfway out of the cart, almost ready to fall over the edge and hit their head on the floor? And then they turn around and they, oh no, and they go crazy, and they grab the little child, and the little child is startled. You could have fallen out of there and busted your head. Stay down in the bottom of this cart. And they push him down in the cart, and he's sitting there thinking, what did I just do that was wrong? What did I do that was dangerous? And I'm thinking, so what should a person do who's shopping with a little kid while they're looking at merchandise? They probably ought to have one hand on the little kid, so if they can't see the little kid, at least they've got contact with him while they're looking at merchandise. Or don't they put little seat belts in those child seats now, where you can buckle your little kid in so they won't fall out and bump their head? The emotional cue I see sent most often by most caregivers in a store is that you are just making my shopping spree more complicated and less pleasant. And sometimes I'll look at those little kids and they'll look at me and I'll smile, and I think, wow, wouldn't it be fun to take this little kid and go over in the place where they sell sandwiches, like if it was a Walmart, the little Subway place, and just wheel in there and sit down in a booth and buy something this little kid could eat and just sit there and feed him and talk to him and let them have a good time while their mother finishes her shopping. I mean, why don't we have someone go with us when we take our kids shopping so they can do that, so they can give their undivided attention to the little children? That's why I told my wife to quit working when our little grandsons were born, and so you can go shopping with your daughters when they take these two little boys, because I was just a little bit fearful that our two grandsons might have some of my hyperactivity in them, and I knew how much that got me in trouble, and I was just hoping that I could spare them some grief by having a grandmother who was there just to hang out with them while their mothers were trying to do things that they could interfere with, not by intention, just by being who they were. Page 213, infants play by imitating others' actions. Have you ever watched a 2-year-old spank a doll? Have you ever seen that happen? I watched a little 2-year-old take one of her dolls and hold her up and give her a lecture and then say, I'm going to have to give you swats now. And it just made me laugh to see that this little kid was just mimicking what they had seen. They were actually taking this little doll and doing with the little doll what had been done with them. And they just imitate other people's actions. Which means what? We as caregivers ought to be thinking about, are these actions worth imitating? Or should we maybe behave differently with our children? Page 215 talks about conflicts. It says most conflicts are struggles over toys, about 84% of them, and for attention from adults. So if we're struggling over toys, what's that all about? Is it that we don't have enough toys to play with? No, we've got lots of toys. It's just that everybody wants to play with the same toy. Well, then let's take that one toy, and if everybody wants to play with it and there's 10 kids in the room who are going to be here for an hour, then everybody gets it for 6 minutes, and that means for the rest of the 54 minutes everybody else has to find some other toys to play with. I mean, can't we just, is this struggle over toys kind of a selfishness thing? I just want what everybody else wants and I want it for the whole time. It's not going to happen. How many of you want to play with this toy? Okay, all of you do. Then there's 10 of you that want to play with it, so you each get it for 6 minutes. So I'll set a little 6-minute timer. When it's gone, it goes to the next person, the next person. In the meantime, the rest of you find another toy to play with. Or sometimes it's just wanting attention from the adults. A little kid is going to, what would you call it, pick a fight with another little kid just to get my attention? Or a little kid is going to take somebody else's toy just to get my attention? Well, if I know that can happen, then I need to be watching. Don't make a child engage in conflict to get your attention. Look for kids who seem to want some attention, need some attention, and spend some time giving them your attention. Just focus on saying, I'm not gonna wait till there's a conflict. I'm going to try to take care of their need for attention early on. Page 216 says children use make-believe and pretend to embellish objects and actions in their play. So what are some things that little 2-year-olds do that embellish objects and actions in play? Can you think of anything they do? When you see them, what? My animals have all been out playing in the dirt, and now they need a bath. If they're stuffed animals, we have a serious problem here, don't we? Can you wash stuffed animals? Maybe buy the kind that can be washed and give them some of those to play with and say, these are the animals that you can pretend that they've been outside getting dirty and need to have a bath. These are the animals that you can't give a bath to. And just help the little kids sort out which ones they can do what kind of make-believe and pretend with. Do you have these kids have little dolls that they can feed stuff to? Can you take a little ball of milk and stick it in this little doll's mouth because there's a hole there and squeeze milk into it? Yes, but I think what happens is that if you do, the milk goes into the fibrous body of the little doll, and then it gets sour and smells bad, and then we have to throw the doll away because it can't live at our house anymore smelling like that. Because you weren't supposed to be squirting milk inside that doll's mouth. That was just a hole to put the bottle where you pretend there's milk going in there. So somehow, knowing that children do a lot of this make-believe stuff, you have to kind of be there to help or realize that some toys will be destroyed in the process. And I can see saying to a little 2-year-old, we're going to have to throw this doll away. It can't be fixed. It smells bad. And some little kid is going to want to do what? They won't want to throw their doll away. They will want to have a funeral for a little doll who drank some bad milk and died. I'm going, oh man. So try to hit some of it off if you can, but if you can't, then there you are. Join the party. It's called 2-year-old development. So what about early childhood development? Chapter 7 is physical, and then chapter 8 and 9 we'll talk about next time will be cognitive and socio-emotional. And this is ages 3 to 6. And on page 223 it says, the 3 to 6-year-olds play is highly imaginative and full of fantasy and pretend. Do any of you work with 3 to 6-year-olds? Anybody working with 3 to 6-year-olds? Okay, at 2 years, they knew about 200 words. So when we finish the last section, birth to 2, by the time they're 2, they've got about 200 words in their vocabulary. By the time they're 6, they're going to have 10,000 words in their vocabulary. They go from 200 to 10,000 words in their vocabulary. Now, does that tell you what's going to be happening with the age 3 to 6-year-olds? They're going to be talking a lot because they're discovering all these new words and they have the capacity to understand what they're saying or what they're hearing. They have the capacity to repeat those words, and they're going to use those words to imagine all kinds of things and fantasize about all kinds of things. They read a book about a covered wagon going west for whatever reason, and they want to do what? Build a covered wagon in their living room? How do you build a covered wagon in your living room? Can't you make anything with blankets and chairs? So that means you just give these 3 to 6 year olds a whole bunch of blankets and chairs and let them rearrange things and build stuff. Which means, I think, you even let them do some pretty bizarre things in their rooms. Just because it's where they are. And why not? If their vocabulary is growing this much from 3 to 6, we just probably need to promote a lot of physical activity, letting them be physically active. Probably the thing that scared me most about grandsons coming along, our daughters never had the inclination to climb trees. I had a grandson who, I don't know, it's like he had a wish to be a bird. And he would just start up a tree and just keep going, and pretty soon I'd hear this, "Hi, Poppy," and he's way too far up in that tree. I mean, if he steps on one branch and it breaks, something in his body's going to break when he hits the ground. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? But what's happening is he's very active, and he's just doing what comes to his mind. So it's like, all right, let's find some way to rechannel all of this energy and this activity, and keep in mind that I think what you can say is, if his vocabulary grows from 200 words to 10,000 words, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on inside his life, his body, his mind, his emotions that are probably of a similar magnitude in terms of what's happening with his growth and development. What should people do if they suspect that children are not receiving proper care and attention? That's on page 223 in your textbook. What does it say you're supposed to do? If you know a child is not receiving proper care and attention, does it say report it to the police or to the Department of Family Services? Is that what the book is telling you to do? Do most people do that? Page 225, I'm sorry, page 225. Do most people do that? Do most people call the police department or the Department of Family Services if they see a child who's not receiving proper care and attention? What would you think of someone who did that? I thought one time, well, we're probably going to get in trouble with this new neighbor we have, but their little 6-year-old child would come home from school in the dead of winter, and she would go to the front door and nobody would open the door, so she would walk around the house. And what I discovered by driving around the block is that she was sitting on the back porch waiting for her parents to get home. in this kind of weather, that's wrong. So I called the police department and said, there's a little girl who's sitting outside in the cold because nobody's home. And they came and sat in the car with her until the parents showed up, and then talked to the parents about it. And I told him, I said, if the little girl needs a place to stay till her parents get home, she's welcome to stay at our house right across the street. But that's just not safe for her to be sitting out in the cold like that. And when the parents came home, the police talked to them, and I don't know what was said or what transpired. The little kid never did come to stay at our house, but from that point on, I think they probably, gave her a key to the house so she could get in. So if she came home and nobody was there, she could open the front door and go inside. Did any of you have a little key you wore around your neck so that when you got home from school? Anyone have a, what do we call those kids? Latchkey children? Can you imagine coming home from school? Do any of you remember coming home from school in first grade when you were 6 years old? And the door being locked and nobody's home? Or do you remember coming home from school and your mom having cookies and milk for you to snack on till supper time and talk to you about what happened at school? Any of you remember when you were 6 years old?
I was homeschooled.
What?
I was homeschooled.
You were homeschooled, so you didn't have
Didn't
to
have that
come
problem.
home. You were there already.
Yep.
Did you have a little schoolroom at home?
Yeah, it was our dining room.
The dining room,
Mm-hmm.
where you ate your meals, is where you had to do your schoolwork.
Usually ended up being the kitchen where we ate instead.
So you ate in the kitchen because the dining room became your schoolroom.
Yep.
That's kind of sounds like fun. What, you got to get up and go to school in your pajamas?
We could be, yeah.
Man. Didn't have to get dressed? Anybody else have memories of being 6 years old? I think probably a child who has to come home to an empty house. That could probably be a little unsettling to a 6-year-old. Maybe not all of them, depending on their personality. Page 226 talks about growth spurts. During early childhood, they'll grow 2 to 3 inches per year, gain 5 or 6 pounds per year, and by age 6, they'll have 70% of their adult height and 1/3 of their adult weight. Well, that might not be true in every case, but generally speaking, there's just a lot of rapid growth going on. Which means if they're growing, if there's a lot of rapid physical growth going on, what does a little child need if they're growing rapidly physically? Fuel for the body to grow. And where does that fuel come from? From food. And what kind of fuel makes for the best physical growth and development? Twinkies. No. Someone told me that you can put a Twinkie in a cardboard box and in 10 years it still tastes as good as it does today. What does that tell you about a Twinkie? That whatever it has in the way of preservatives, I don't think your body needs that kind of dose of preservatives to become healthy. What do these children need to grow physically healthy? I mean, just thinking about it in terms of what kind of What kind of diet should they have? What should we be thinking about in terms of their fueling their rapid growth? A healthy diet, it says on page 228, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and minerals, water, whole wheat, and vegetables. What's left out of this list? Twinkies,
Sugar.
sugar. Remember I asked you early on, did all of you remember eating Cheerios out of the little bag when you were little kids? Okay, now did you have Cheerios or did you have Honey Nut Cheerios in your little bag? Anyone remember? You don't. Well, which would be better? Regular Cheerios or Honey Nut Cheerios?
Honey nut.
What?
Honey nut.
I didn't say better tasting. I said better for you is what I meant.
Regular.
Regular. So how have we developed this taste for sweetness and sugar in our culture? Where does that come from? Just go to this grocery store and look down the aisle of cereals for children. Somebody should be going to jail for the stuff that they're making to sell to little children to put milk on and ruin the milk that they need to grow healthy with. Come on. It's just like regular Cheerios would be fine. So that means we do away with what? The Honey Nut ones? And are there some others out there too? So, what about puffed wheat? Would that be okay to give them some puffed wheat? So which does a little kid want to pick when he comes down the aisle? The puffed wheat box? Or the Cocoa Puffs box? Or the, what is that called? Golden Puffs box or something? I mean, there's a whole bunch of boxes of puffed wheat, and a bunch of them are just full of sugar, and one of them would just be good for you by itself. Shredded wheat. Just buy a box of shredded wheat biscuits or the little miniature biscuits, and you just pour some milk on it. Did you know that for feeding these little kids, that if you just took the cereal and poured some milk on it and let the milk sit there a while, there's enough sweetness in the milk to sweeten up the cereal? Do all of you know that? So how do we know we're getting too much sugar stuffed into these little bodies of these 3 to 6 year olds in our society? Just go to the store, sit there with a piece of paper, and try to say 3 to 6 year olds would be about this tall. Just watch them coming in the store with their parents and have a little chart. Underweight, normal weight, overweight. And which column will have the most check marks at the end of the day?
Overweight.
Because Because children in our world today eat too much? No, they eat too much of the wrong thing. And you can make healthy snacks for little kids. They need protein. So where do they get protein? Do you know your sources of protein?
Eggs.
Eggs,
Meats.
meat, beans, nuts. Do you know your sources of carbs?
Breads.
What kind of bread should we be eating?
Whole wheat, right?
Whole wheat or that deliciously fluffy tasting white stuff? That's called bread but really isn't. My wife discovered a bread that she just loves. It's called Healthy Nut. It's got a bunch of nuts in it and it's made out of whole wheat. And I know why it's so good. Because it costs $4 a loaf. I'm going, whoa. Then I find out that I could buy it at Walmart for about $3 a loaf. And so I say, when you're ready for some more of that bread, give me a list so I can go to Walmart and get it. But somehow we just need to become healthier. Okay, I'm drinking water today because I just need to stay hydrated, and I just need to be drinking water, take it in liquids. Well, I've got some other bottles of liquids in my house. I can see one of them right now. It's a tall green bottle that says Mountain Dew on the side. Why didn't I bring one of those with me to sip on here in front of you? It would have made you all want to drink some Mountain Dew, and that would be wrong to influence you like that. In fact, I've gone without drinking that stuff for so long. Every now and then when I open one, I go, whoa, this stuff is terrible. You can actually change your appetite for different foods and beverages just by deciding I'm going to change the way I live to live a healthier lifestyle, not only for my own sake, but for the sake of the kids that I have in my life that I'm going to try to help grow in terms of proper nutrition and fuel. And vegetables. Vegetables. Do any of you have favorite vegetables?
Carrots.
Carrots. Any other favorite vegetables in this room?
I like broccoli.
Broccoli.
Green beans.
Green beans. Any others?
Cucumbers.
Cucumbers.
Brussels sprouts.
What?
Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts.
Raisin bread.
The first time I heard about Brussels sprouts, I thought, ooh, that sounds gross. Then when I looked at them, I said, they look gross. Then when I tasted some when they were cooked, I'm going, whoa, why didn't my mom ever fix stuff like this? We grew up having green beans, corn, and peas. And of the three, my favorite was peas. Now see, shame on some of you for having a distaste for a very good vegetable. Hey, in VeggieTales, is there a P in VeggieTales?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does everybody give him a bad time? They don't like him on VeggieTales any more than people in real life like him, huh? Poor little guy. Page 229 says, malnutrition is when children do not consume adequate calories, proteins, vitamins, and minerals. And 12 million Americans do not have food or money to buy food. About 12 million Americans. That means about 3% of the people in America do not have food or money to buy food. If it's 12 million. Unless they're talking about 12 million children, then that would be a higher percentage. Yeah, we better look at something on the internet. Let me just go back down here again. Let's just go up here and type sample turn this back on so you can see what I'm doing. Sample meal plan for preschoolers. Sample meal plan for children. Oh, let's put preschoolers on here. Did it pop up? Sample meal plan for preschool. Sample meal plan, let's just look at this. What should I feed my preschooler? Canada's Food Guide. Vegetables and fruits. Grain products, that would be cereals. So you want wheat, you get shredded wheat. You want oats, you get Cheerios. You could also get puffed wheat. You want corn, you get corn flakes. So what could you do if you wanted to even back up from buying boxed cereals and be healthier than that? You could have just plain oats out of a box, rolled oats. Any of you eat that? Or cream of wheat. I mean, you can get more basic. If you're looking for a quick way to do something, you say, okay, I can buy boxed cereals, but not the ones with all the sugar in them, the other stuff. Milk. Meat. So what do we hear? For breakfast, an egg sandwich. And I don't know why. they want to give them skim milk or 1%, but they do. Cheese and tomatoes. A morning snack would be some berries or some yogurt for lunch. Rice and bean soup, an afternoon snack, apple slices, dinner, some mini meatballs, cottage cheese as a bedtime snack, shredded wheat for another day with strawberries or bananas in it. A morning snack, mango or peach slices. For lunch, tuna, no thanks. Cucumber slices, all right, I'll go for that, but egg salad, okay, maybe I could handle some of that. I just don't care for tuna. And I don't even know what humus is.
Hummus.
Hummus?
It's
What
kind of-
is it?
It's like a dip. It's made of chickpeas.
It's made of what?
Chickpeas?
Well, there you go. I'm passing that one up. Chicken, shrimp, or tofu vegetables. Bedtime snack, yogurt, or a fruit smoothie. When you look over this list, when you look at a list of what we need to do to make children healthy in terms of physical development and feeding them right, I guess think about this. If you made a list of all the things that the children need to eat healthy, and we went to the grocery store and said, let's eliminate everything in the grocery store that we don't need to add to put on to be buying for our kids for healthy growth and development. Can you think of any aisles in the grocery store that we could completely eliminate? Completely eliminate the whole aisle. All we're talking about doing is just trying to take the next generation of children and help them become healthy adults with good eating habits. So what aisle at the store could we completely eliminate? Anybody want to suggest one or two?
The alcohol section.
Okay, I would agree that the whole section that sells alcohol, get it out of there. It shouldn't be in a place where we sell nourishment for children. If you want that stuff, you have to go someplace else to buy it. And please, quit selling it at the gas station. That's all I need, is to be pumping gas while some guy's sitting there buying alcoholic beverages. What is that all about? When does this class end?
50.
What?
10:50.
I'm sorry?
10:50.
10:50? It goes from 9:30 to 10:50? Is that, and that's what it is 10:50? What in the world? Okay, well, let's at least eliminate another one. So the alcohol aisle is gone. What's the next one over from alcohol? Potato chips and soft drinks? That one's just gone.
There's juice in that aisle.
What?
Never mind.
What's the next aisle we could take out of there?
Candy and chocolate.
Candy.
What?
Candy and chocolate.
The whole candy aisle? The whole aisle full of candy could be gone? The cereal, if we only had it down to, we could take most of those cereals out of there, all of them that are full of sugar, over to the frozen food section. Get rid of all of that junk stuff including the ice cream. I'm thinking the whole frozen food section can disappear. No, we still need some place to keep the frozen strawberries and frozen peaches and that kind of stuff. You understand what would happen if we rearranged the grocery store? It wouldn't need to be near as big as it is. I don't know why the grocers of America don't say, you know what? It's time for us to decide to make America healthy. We're all going to agree to no longer sell junk that people shouldn't consume, so we're only going to sell healthy stuff. And if you want the junk, you'll have to go someplace else to buy it. Have to go to Dollar Tree or something to buy the junk stuff. And what would Dollar Tree say? Hey, come on over. I just think it's sad. And so you say, well, if the store isn't going to do it, then I have to do it to make a decision about what's healthy for my children, my grandchildren, and for the next generation of children that I'm going to be working with. Okay. Well, we're out of time, so I'll put the marker here. We'll pick up with this next time around.
Yes,